Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, the World Cup is over for the United States of America, and as I suspected, there were at least some leftists who were cheering against the United States, cheering against them in the World Cup because, well, President Donald Trump. I'm not even kidding. I got at least one comment on our Facebook page that will illustrate the point. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk about Democrat Senate candidate Graham Platner, who now has an accuser, someone who has accused him of sexual assault, and he is now under pressure from the Democrat Party to drop out of the race. He is again he won the Democrat primary in Maine, and so there's pressure for him to come off the ballot. He has, I believe, just about a week to do that, and if he doesn't, the Democrats may be stuck with him. So I want to talk about that as well. We might hit on some other things along this journey today. I appreciate you tuning in. If you have thoughts and questions and feedback, you can always text 317-785-1030, 317-785-1030. You can also email Todd at toddhuffshow.com. So that's where we're headed today, my friends. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a story that kind of writes itself. The day after.
There we go. Sorry, it played a clip in my ear. I think it went out to you as well. So technical glitch here. But friends, let's face it, every dollar that you spend is a vote for the kind of America that you want to live in. That's why we launched Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a free directory. It's a directory of businesses that align with your conservative values. These businesses have made a promise: no support for leftist candidates, no support for leftist causes. And if they break that promise, they're out of said directory. So if you're tired of funding the woke agenda, the anti-American agenda, the agenda that roots against the United States, even though it's the sport of soccer, they'll root against the United States in that particular setting. If you're tired of that sort of nonsense, visit freedommarketplace.net. It's free, it's easy, and if I dare say so myself, it is the right thing to do. freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all, my friends. Yesterday, I talked about this World Cup. I shared with you that I'm not a soccer fan. I'm not. But I'm a fan of America, and I don't know what's so hard to understand about this. But I was rooting. It doesn't matter to me if it's Tiddlywinks, if it's freeze tag, if it's baking competition, if it's America versus someone, I'm rooting for America. Now, I suppose if the people representing America hate America, or if they kneeled during the national anthem or some such thing, I might want to rethink that and either not watch or make some other decision. But I was actually watching before the match last night in Seattle. I was watching the U.S. men's national team actually singing the words to the national anthem, which pumped this particular Patriot up as I was watching the pre-match festivities before the last night's World Cup. But when the game began, the United States just candidly got its rear end kicked, which is fine. I mean, listen, the United States is eventually going to figure soccer out on the world stage. These other countries have been playing it for a long time. It's a top sport around the world. It's not the top sport here. I don't know where it falls. I haven't looked at I haven't looked at surveys, but it's certainly not more popular than the NFL. It's certainly not more popular. I would think it's not more popular than the NBA or basketball. It's certainly not more popular. Well, it's probably not more popular than Major League Baseball. NHL, I don't know. It's somewhere in this vicinity. 3, 4, 5. It's not the top sport for sure. But it is around the rest of the world, which is fine, even though it's not an exciting. I've got some ideas that would make it a more exciting sport, but it's not an exciting sport. I mean, there's exciting moments, I guess, but it's just not something. My interest, if you want to say that, my kids played soccer, still play soccer. That's where my interests lie. In fact, I've coached soccer. I had no business coaching soccer. I had no business. Everything that I learned about soccer, that I coached, especially the younger kids about soccer, could be traced back to some of the basics about just defensive positioning related to football and basketball. Angles, staying in front of the ball, forcing the ball, away from the center of the field, down the sidelines, that sort of stuff. But I'm not a soccer expert. I'm not a soccer fan, but I'm a fan of anything my kids do. And so that's where it came into play. But anyway, we watched the match last night, and I knew it. I knew when I said yesterday, I made a comment. I don't know if I made it here or elsewhere, but I commented that there would be people on the left. I think I did comment here. People on the left who would be rooting against the United States because of President Trump. And they really did, at least in some cases. In fact, there's a guy that posted something on my page that after the United States lost to, I'm trying to find it here, after they lost last night to Belgium in the World Cup, said they lost 4-1. Ha ha! Everything Trump touches goes to excrement, I guess is what I would say. So that's how some people on the left respond to this. President Trump, again, got involved because one of the Balogun, one of the primary players, one of the better players, I guess, from what I've been told and understand, one of the better players on the team was red carded a previous match and was tagged. Went through this yesterday. Had gone through and wasn't going to be playing in last night's game. So Trump called FIFA. I found this highly entertaining that Trump called FIFA. FIFA had already been investigating, they said anyway. They overruled the decision. Belgium got upset at this. In fact, I want to talk about that in a moment as well, because the country of Belgium, which I'm certain well over 80% of this country can't pinpoint on a map. They might be able to say it's in Europe. That's about as far as they could go. But that's Belgium is out there trash talking the United States of America because the red card was overruled, and now I'll get to that in a moment. But the bottom line here is that there are people who are happy today that America lost. Listen, you don't have to like the World Cup. Maybe you were ready for it to be over. And now, even though it's not over, it kind of is, because America's out of it, at least from the perspective of many Americans. But listen, you don't have to have wanted them like the sport. You could have been indifferent about it. But to be against the country because Trump is in charge, to be against the team doing well because Trump is president, is a wild, wild position for someone to take, to celebrate that. And there are some, I'm not saying that there's an overwhelming number, but I said yesterday they didn't know. The left doesn't know how to respond when Trump got involved and got one of the best players reinstated for yesterday's match. Some of them are absolutely, they just didn't know how to process it because they hate Trump so much. It overrides everything in their minds. If Trump is for it, they have to be against it. They have to be against it vociferously. They have to be against it dramatically. They have to go to the streets. I speculated that, some of these folks would be rooting for the other team. And it appears that at least for some people, hopefully it was isolated, but for some people, that's how they responded. But let's talk about Belgium here, and I'll get out of soccer. We'll move on to Graham Platner here. Here's a headline, the New York Post. You ready for this? Belgium trolls U.S. with savage two-word message after World Cup knockout. This was written late last night. Michael Blinn, New York Post. Here we go. Belgium had a simple and savage post-game message for the U.S. on Monday night. Overturn this. The Red Devils' official X account posted alongside a photo of star Romelu Lukaku. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that in the moment. After their dominant 4-1 win over the U.S. men's national team at Seattle Stadium. The trash talk comes after a few days of World Cup chaos in which American star Folarin Balogun had a one-game suspension issued by FIFA. It was suspended, and then thanks to some help from President Trump, there we go. There's the problem. This, of course, is what makes everything the problem. President Trump makes a phone call, and it potentially could have had something to do with it. Maybe it didn't. We don't know. But Trump, of course, will take the credit for that. And now people are cheering for America to lose, as I said. But also, now Belgium is trash talking. Now this, I got to say, as an Indiana Pacers fan, I think they kind of stole this. I think they stole this from my daughter's favorite NBA player, Tyrese Halliburton. If you remember going into the NBA playoffs, not this season because Tyrese Halliburton missed the entire season due to an Achilles tendon tear, but he last season entering into the playoffs, which by the way was perhaps, they didn't win the championship. They were 1 half away from winning the championship. They were up at halftime of game 7 last year in the NBA Finals. The Pacers were over the Thunder. But it was perhaps the single greatest playoff run by a player in NBA history. The amount of incredible comebacks, the amount of buzzer-beating, game winners, thrilling performances by Tyrese Halliburton and some of the other Pacers has been unmatched. But he was rated, Tyrese Halliburton was, as one of the most, I guess, overrated player in the NBA in the Atlantic by other players in the NBA. And of course, this fueled Tyrese Halliburton, as it would any competitive athlete. And after he hit one of these game-winning shots, he said, overrate that. Overrate that. My daughter's got a shirt that says, overrate that. And I loved it, and I was here for it. And, it's directed against nameless, faceless players in the NBA, right? Now we've got Belgium coming along and stealing a version of this. They defeat us, kick our rear ends 4-1, and then they say overturn this. Now, I think that, well, I had another comment on Facebook that I wanted to get to. This is from a guy that I actually know a little bit. When I was commenting on Trump's involvement in this yesterday, Mike, a guy that he went to our school system, but he said this to me on our Facebook comments, which I get a lot of them, but I did see this one. As a former athlete, he says, you can't possibly think this is a good thing, right? I can't possibly think that it was a good thing that Trump got involved. For starters, I didn't say it was good or bad. I just find it entertaining. I knew what it was going to do to the left. And so his comment got me thinking a little bit. And it reminded me of a situation that I had when I was in school. I was back in this a long time ago. I was an athlete in school. Mike's right. I was okay, decent athlete. I played basketball, football. I ran track my junior and senior year. I tore my ACL my junior year in my left knee. And that's a fall sport. So I did some recovery, and that's that back then was a really, really long road to recovery. So you miss almost the entire football season. I missed basketball season. And then it came time for spring sports. And it was basically back then a year to recover. But I'd gotten to the point where they had given me the clearance. I'd worked my tail end off. And so I ran track. I had never ran track before. In fact, I'll be honest, our very first meet, I kid you not, it was an indoor meet that we had gone to. I had never, hear me say this, I had never used the blocks before in my life. Not once. We had a track at my school, but it was cinder. So we didn't have a lot of the setups, and we just hadn't practiced. I don't know. I had never used the blocks. And there was a guy on the team, a kid in my class, who literally 30 seconds before I was running the 55-meter indoor, he was showing me how to do the blocks. I never, ever done it before. Happy to tell you that I won that meet, that 55-meter dash too. But the bottom line is, I was learning track on the fly. But I had gotten to in the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash. I was better at the 100. I tell people that the 200-meter dash was a distance event for me. In fact, 55-meter was about perfect for me. But nonetheless, we had outdoor track in high school, 100 and 200. I was in the conference title, conference championship for the 100-meter dash. And we ran the 100-meter dash, and it was a close race. When you're in these races and there's a couple of you that, you can't tell really if you won or not. It was that close. And I remember after the match or after the race, my dad coming up to me all fired up, my grandpa, hey man, you need to appeal that. And I'm like, hey man, the race is over. They said I finished second. It's no big deal. I mean, I did, in my mind, my part of the race was over. I went out there. I was the athlete. I ran. I trusted the judges to get it right. They said I didn't win. I mean, I can't say definitively, but there were people, of course, at the start-finish line, including our athletic director, and they, on their own accord, by the way, not anything I had said, I just basically accepted it. I just said, look, I mean, that's what they said. I'm not, my job is to run races. My job is to do the best I can, let the chips fall where they may. If other people want to appeal, if other people want to get involved for something else that happened, that's their prerogative, not mine. I think they did appeal it. They lost it, but it was funny because there was a picture of it that came out in the paper a little bit later. It was, papers take back when in the days of newspapers when they were popular. It took a couple of days sometimes for those things to come out, or this was an issue that came out twice a week or whatever. And there was a picture, and in the picture, for the first time, I remember taking it to my dad and saying, you know what, I think I might have won that race. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about this with Trump. So I would think if I'm an athlete on the team, first of all, there's rules for red cards and everything else. I would have wanted FIFA to do what was right. And I think it was clear FIFA didn't do what was right. And so my position would have been, I think this is hard for people on the left to understand because they want to micromanage everything. I'll come on here and I'll argue for a position, trying to win your agreement, right? Trying to find an agreement or to present it in such a way to where you say, oh, yes, I agree with that. I think that that's right. This is not how the left looks at this. The left, if Trump calls FIFA, that's apparently a form of fascism to the left. It's not. There's nothing that precludes the president of the United States from calling FIFA. Now, if I was the president, would I have done? I don't know. I have no idea. But it's not objectively wrong that he does it. It didn't bother me if I was a player. It wouldn't have bothered me. That again is like the story I told you. What's things that are happening outside of the playing, outside of the game itself, outside of the arena of competition. And I would want the rules to be enforced the correct way. But as a player, you have to be prepared. Look, we might have to play this match without one of our best players. Let's just be about the business of being ready to do that. That's how I would have thought about it. I wouldn't have sat there and been upset because Trump, this virtue signaling and responses to things like this is reserved exclusively to people on the left. They just don't understand having an opinion that says, you know what? People are going to be people. There's nothing wrong that says, that prevents him from doing it. Maybe I agree, maybe I don't, but really I don't care. I just want the rules to be enforced, and I'm here to play the sport that I'm in. That's the way that I would have looked at it. So that's what I want to say about that, my friends. And by the way, if you've not followed us on Facebook, I encourage you to do that. We post clips of this program there each and every day. We do the same on Instagram as well. Both of our pages there are Todd Huff Show. Just go to facebook.com/Todd Huff Show or Instagram.com/Todd Huff Show, and you will find those pages. I ask that you follow us. You can engage with us there. You might even want to jump into the fight, jump into the fray of some of the things that are said there. But if you want me directly, the best way to do that is email Todd@ToddHuffShow.com, or you can reach. Actually, the best way is to join the Inner Circle, which is free. Just text the word "join" to 317-785-1030. Friends, let's face it, living with discomfort is tough, and while prescription medications can certainly help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. Family-run company, they do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers, and they lab test every batch to make sure that it is clean. No synthetics, no chemicals, no surprises, just honest, natural Kratom that's been used, by the way, for generations. Real Kratom is properly handled. The problems that you heard about Kratom comes from the synthetic garbage, the synthetic blends, the contaminated junk, and Christopher's does not do that. They keep it real, they keep it clean, they keep you informed. You can start with their Kratom starter pack. Code Todd Huff will save you 10% at purchase. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Promo code Todd Huff will save you the money at checkout, my friends. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, timeout is coming here for me, my friends. When I get back after the break, which we will have in a different stream as we're testing this still on Facebook Live. But when I get back, we'll talk about Graham Platner, what is happening there, the allegations that are made there, and Democrats now pretending like none of what happened for the past few months about Graham Platner did happen. And now they're in a pickle, hoping that he'll resign, step aside here in the next week, or they may be stuck with him on the ballot. So timeout's in order, my friends. Sit tight, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You know that here, a month or so ago, Maine had a primary. We talked about it here on this program. In fact, we talked about the candidate, Graham Platner. This is the guy, by the way, if you need a quick refreshing, because it's hard to keep these leftists keep track of them. Some of these people that are, saying some crazy things, doing some crazy things, and in this case, being alleged to have done some things that are criminal. But Graham Platner is the Democrat candidate for U.S. Senate in Maine. Now, you'll know that Maine is a state currently with a Republican senator for this particular seat that's up for election. And her name is Susan Collins. Susan Collins is a rhino, Republican in name only. But a rhino is vastly superior, of course, to a radical leftist. A rhino is superior, at least from the perspective of constitutional conservatism of the Republican Party. It's much better to have a rhino in office, even though I don't want rhinos in office. If my choice is a moderate Democrat, a liberal Democrat, a leftist Democrat, or a rhino Republican, it's better for rhino Republicans because, my friends, because that, of course, puts Republicans in power. At least we don't have things in the Senate that are getting introduced by the minority party that are absolutely just, illogical and radically insane. So, but he's running Graham Platner in Maine for Senate, and he was officially nominated in Maine here recently. Headline here at the Epic Times. Now, this is going to tell you the background. Well, we'll go through the background as well, but let me read the headline of where we are today. Democratic leaders call for Platner to exit Senate race after sexual assault allegation. Schumer and Gillibrand, those are both, by the way, senators from New York, Democrat senators, said the Democrats' Senate campaign arm will not invest in the Maine race if Platner remains on the ballot. Now, Graham Platner is the one who had the Nazi tattoo on his chest. There are pictures of this. He told us he didn't know what this tattoo was for, I don't know, a number of years. It wasn't until recently that he knew that he had this. I believe, this is going from memory, I haven't read this morning, but I believe he has since had the tattoo removed. So Graham Platner, he had a bunch of problems heading into the primary. I remember talking about them. I remember Democrats. He, by the way, had been accused. There were murmurs of some inappropriate things happening, some domestic violence sort of stuff. I don't want to make allegations. I'm just telling you what was reported. That involved his name, previous girlfriends, and that sort of stuff. He denied it all. The Democrats, listen, they went out there and they defended the guy. They basically said that there was no evidence. But now they can no longer, well, I guess they can say it, but it's going to be a lot harder because Politico reported just this weekend that Jenny Racicot, a 41-year-old Maine resident who said she had an on and off relationship with Platner for more than 2 years, I'm reading here from the Epic Times, alleged that that's Graham Platner, entered her home uninvited while intoxicated in late 2021 and forced himself on her despite her repeated objections. Racicot told the outlet she cut off contact with Platner after the alleged incident and did not file a police report. Platner and his campaign denied, of course, the allegation in statements to Politico. The campaign's statement said the allegations were, quote, coached and coordinated by out-of-state establishment operatives, end quote, and noted the report's timing a week before the state's ballot deadline. The deadline for candidates to drop out of the contest, this is important for what's going to happen from this point moving forward. But the deadline for candidates to drop out of the contest with time for a party to replace a nominee is July 13th. Here we are. What is today? July 7th? Is that right? 4th was Saturday, 5th. Yeah, today's the 7th. So they have a week from yesterday. Schumer and Senator Kristen Gillibrand chair the Democrat Party. The Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee. They called the allegations incredibly disturbing in a joint statement, saying that the violence, abuse, and sexual assault are absolutely unacceptable. Graham Platner needs to immediately withdraw as the Democratic nominee for Senate and allow Maine Democrats the opportunity to choose a new candidate who can defeat Susan Collins. That, of course, is the Rhino Republican there. The DSCC will not invest in the Maine Senate race if Platner remains on the ballot. So there's a mess here, and this all came because of these allegations. I want to talk a little bit more about this, my friends, but I've got to take a quick little breather here. Ever notice how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That is not by accident, my friends. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team of experts. They have a wide variety of high-level investment strategies, things like private equity, private credit, options strategies. They couple that with expert legal guidance. It's all about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today, tomorrow, and well into the future. So if you're looking to do more than just manage money, if you want to make sure that you leave a mark and build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. FullSuiteWealth.com is the website. That's FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. Now, there were, of course, reports of some of these things well before the primary. I remember talking about them. I remember talking about them a lot. And the left chose to ignore them. The same left, by the way, that tells us that we should believe all women, which, of course, is a silly way of looking at things. The left looks at everything superficially. Who's making the allegation? If it's a white, Christian, Republican, conservative man, self-employed, got to be lying, can't believe anything he's saying. If it is a woman, we're supposed to just believe it. Unless, of course, the woman is accusing a Democrat, especially someone who's a leftist Democrat, then they've got to scratch their heads and say, we don't have evidence. That's how this sort of stuff is done. And so now we've got a situation where they have a nominee where the heat has been turned up, and now there's an actual allegation here. Specific, detailed allegation reported by none other than Politico. So now the Democrat Party has said, listen, we're not going to fund this guy's campaign. We're going to pull out of the state of Maine unless someone else comes in. The problem is he's already won. The problem from the Democrats' perspective is that he has already won. Graham Platner has already won the Democrat nomination for Senate in the state of Maine. So the Democrat Party cannot force him out. It can pressure him out, but it can't technically force him out. So they've cut off all financial ties. They basically said, you're on your own, buddy. We can't support you. They're hoping to get enough heat placed on this guy to where he'll just simply step out of the race. And that, of course, may be where this is headed. Platner has commented that, what he say here? Platner said earlier in the evening, this was over the weekend, that a video, or in a video, I should say, posted on X that his campaign was, quote, taking the time to reflect on the best path forward. So he's out there saying he's deciding, thinking about what his options are, reviewing them. But he's got a week, basically. He's got a week until this particular decision is finalized. This reminds me a little bit of what happened in 2024 when Joseph Robinette Bribery was the Democrat candidate for president of the United States, and he was pressured to come off of the ballot. In fact, it reminds me a whole lot of this as I stop and think about it. Reminds me a whole lot of this because Biden won the nomination. There was no one else that even ran against him in his particular case. And there was evidence of plenty of problems with Biden long before the primary even began in 2024. And then Democrats suddenly acted like they realized there was a problem and wanted to do something about it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. I've got to take a time out here, my friends. You're listening to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, the one and only benevolent dictator here behind the microphone, Todd Huff. Be back here, my friends, in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of today's program. Appreciate you being here with us today, my friends. If you haven't done so already, I invite you to join our inner circle. You'll get a daily email in the evening from me. We've relaunched this. This has my take for the day. It's got some additional content. It gives you some information behind this program, links to the stack of stuff if you want to research and read the articles and things that have we've talked about here on this program. It also gives you direct access to us, some bonus content as well. It's totally free. Just text the word join to 317-785-1030, 317-785-1030. My friends, MyPillow is a patriotic America First company. They produce top of the line quality products, including pillows and sheets and towels, slippers, and even dog beds, which we have a dog bed that each of the 3 dogs uses here, Echo, Tango, and Kilo. Of course, Kilo, the newest edition, uses it the least. Echo usually takes the space. But anyway, my friends, these are top of the line, high quality products. They're comfortable. They're affordable. They're even more affordable with coupon code Todd, which you can use on virtually, I'm guessing all products, but I like to say virtually just to be safe, virtually all products at MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd will save you big there, my friends, on their products. And I think that they have very, very good products, and they're made here in the good old US of A by an American patriot, Mike Lindell. So check them out, MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. You know, before the break, I made a comparison. Here between what's happening with Graham Platner and what happened with Joseph Robinette bribery in 2024 during his campaign. And there are certainly similarities because there were red flags on both of these individuals long before the campaigns really even got going. Certainly before the final decision was made by Democrats for both Joseph Robinette bribery and Graham Platner. And they were ignored. These problems were ignored. In the case of President bribery, we had his obvious lack of cognition. We had him bumbling and fumbling around, unable to complete sentences, form coherent thoughts. It was dismissed. It was dismissed by the media. It was dismissed by the Democrat Party. In fact, I saw Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's out there even to this day. She can't get over, by the way, 2016, having lost to Donald Trump, which kicked this whole thing off. And I couldn't have been more happier for that victory to have happened for Trump. But Hillary's out there diagnosing the problem, telling us what's wrong with the Democrat Party. And she said that she wished that Biden would have dropped out. But the thing is, if you go back and look at what she was saying prior to the final stretch of the campaign, she said that she thought Biden should have stayed in the race if he wanted to stay in the race. These people are revisionists. They don't want you to know what's going on. In fact, her job at the time, when she was saying that it was up to Biden what he should do, her job at the time was to prop him up as a candidate for president of the United States. That's what her job was back in those times. Then, when it became politically expedient to abandon that position, when it became obvious that no one was going to defend Biden any longer, then they could come out and say it was obvious that he should have dropped out. Why were these problems ignored? Why were we lied to by the people inside the Biden administration, by the media, blah, blah, blah. This is what happened in 2024. A version of that is happening here, is unfolding with Graham Platner. We knew about some of these things. I've talked about them on this program. They're going to act like they didn't know. They're going to act like they didn't believe all women prior to this. Now they're going to tell us to believe all women again. They're going to say that these allegations need to be taken seriously. Of course, they should have been taken seriously when they were first being brought up and there were murmurs about these things. But that's not how they did this. The left only cares about these things when there are political consequences. Take that to the bank. Now, you could say that this is just true about politics in general, and I would agree with you that this is part of the nature, unfortunately, of politics. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in great quantities in the Democrat Party, because it does. We have 2 cases of similar things. I'm not accusing or saying that the campaigns between Joe Biden and Graham Platner had the same problems, but they both had problems that were ignored by elites in the party, by the media, by voters, until there was nowhere else for them to hide. Friends, Biden used to have X's taped on the floor so that he knew where to stand. He was given a list of pictures of journalists, and it would say, you know, this is the person you call on. Here's his picture, right? There might have been a little map up there. He usually stands in this part of the room. You can ask him. You can ask him this question. This is the kind of stuff that was happening. And the Democrat Party and people on the left and the media were telling us that that was totally fine. There was nothing to see there. Of course, it was a lie. One big lie. In fact, Jake Tapper and some other make-believe journalist wrote a book in the wake of that 2024 election, acting as though they had no idea. They fully knew what was going on. They knew that Biden was not cognitive. Now they're trying to make money. They didn't make money off of lying to the American people, pretending it wasn't a thing. This is part and parcel what you get with today's Democrat Party. I'm out of time, my friends. I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for listening. SDG.